The message came from nowhere. No transmission codes, no signal signature, just a voice echoing across the void of space. It was faint, distorted, and impossibly old. "Fleet Command, this is humanity's vanguard, returning from the dark." Then silence. Across 1,000 worlds, every listening post froze. The signal had traveled from beyond the mapped galaxy, from a region thought to be utterly dead, a place the Galactic Council called the Void Expanse. No one went there. Not even the machines. For centuries, stories had whispered of a fleet that vanished before the dawn of the Council's rule. Ancient human vessels, massive, silent, and lost during the chaos of the Great Exodus, when Earth fell and humanity scattered to the stars. Some said they were destroyed. Others said they had crossed into a dimension of darkness beyond time itself, but no one ever expected to hear from them again, until now. When the signal reached the Terran archive, alarms triggered protocols that hadn't been touched in a million years. The automated systems recognized the encryption key. It was human, authentic, older than any civilization now alive. A research team gathered, unsure whether to treat it as a discovery or a threat. The data carried a pattern, a pulsating code that seemed to breathe like a heartbeat. And with every pulse, more fragments appeared, coordinates, warnings, and a name. Vanguard Fleet 9. Humanity had changed since those ships vanished. The descendants of Earth had become cautious and quiet under the watch of alien overseers. The Galactic Council ruled the stars now, with humans serving as laborers, traders, and second-tier citizens. The memory of their old empire, of their wars, their fleets, their unmatched will, had faded into myth. Most believed that humanity had lost its edge. But deep within their DNA, something still burned. A hunger for discovery, for survival, for reclaiming what was once theirs. When the coordinates were decoded, the readings made no sense. The location existed outside the galaxy's gravitational boundary, in a region with no stable space-time. Yet the transmission was clear. A council delegation demanded the humans delete the data, claiming the area was quarantined for cosmic safety. But the humans didn't listen. Something in that signal called to them. It felt like home, so they built a small expeditionary vessel, the Argent Dawn, manned entirely by human officers. They claimed it was for research, but everyone on board knew the truth. They were chasing ghosts. The captain, an aging veteran who had seen too much of alien control, felt a strange pull toward those coordinates. "If there's even a chance it's them," he said quietly before launch. "We owe it to history to find out." The journey through the void was brutal. Instruments malfunctioned. Gravity bent in ways that defied physics. Time itself stretched thin, and sometimes the stars flickered in patterns that seemed almost alive. Crew members reported hearing faint voices in the static. At first, they dismissed it as fatigue. Then one of the engineers recorded the sound and froze. The voice was speaking in Old Earth English, a language long forgotten except in archives. It said, "Stay away. We are not the same." Still, the Argent Dawn pressed forward. Days turned to weeks, though the clock stopped making sense. Outside the viewport, reality twisted like liquid glass. They reached the coordinates expecting emptiness. Instead, they found them, hundreds of colossal human ships drifting silently in the dark. Their hulls were scarred, covered in frost and dust older than any star. And yet, their engines glowed faintly, still alive after 1,000,000 years. The fleet was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Each vessel was a fortress of forgotten human design, angular, brutal, and magnificent. Massive railguns hung silent along their sides, and deep scars cut through their armor like claw marks. It was as if they had fought something unimaginable and survived. The Argent Dawn approached slowly, sending out a hail signal. No response. Only a low, pulsing vibration echoed through their ship's hull. Then one of the ancient ships moved. Just slightly, but enough. Its systems flickered back to life, one after another, as if awakening from a long sleep. Lights bloomed across its surface. The human crew watched in stunned silence as a 1,000,000-year-old warship powered up, its reactors burning with pale blue fire. The ship's identification code blinked across their monitors. HNS Resolute, The captain whispered, "They're alive." A transmission broke through the static. It wasn't a request or a greeting, it was a command. "Identify yourselves. This sector is under Terran control." The voice was human, but not quite. Too calm, too cold. The comms officer stammered out a reply, explaining who they were, what year it was, and how long the Vanguard fleet had been missing. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the voice returned, lower now, almost sorrowful. If that is true, then the war never ended. Before anyone could respond, the ancient fleet began to move in formation. Massive engines ignited, creating waves of distorted space that rippled through the void. The Argent Dawn tried to keep distance, but their systems were locked. The ancient ships emitted a field that interfered with every signal, every control. It wasn't aggression. It was containment. Like they didn't want witnesses. The captain ordered a retreat, but the ship wouldn't move. The stars outside blurred, stretching like streaks of light. Alarms screamed. Then everything stopped. The crew found themselves staring at a new sky, one filled with unfamiliar constellations. Their navigation systems couldn't place their location. Time sensors indicated they weren't just in another part of space. They were in another era, and floating before them, the ancient fleet formed a perfect circle. In its center, a single ship, the largest of them all, opened its hangar bays. From within, smaller vessels began to emerge, sleek and black, their design far beyond human or alien understanding. They carried the old insignia of Earth's Defense Command, but altered as if rewritten by time itself. The comms crackled again, faint but chilling. "Humanity must endure. The darkness is returning, and we were its first prisoners." The signal cut off and the fleet turned its weapons outward, aimed not at the humans, but at something unseen, something vast, moving in the dark beyond them. The sensors screamed with readings that defied logic, massive energy signatures, alive and ancient, closing in. The captain looked at the crew, his voice shaking. "What do they bring back with them?" Then the lights on the Argent Dawn flickered and every system went dead. The last thing they saw was the silhouette of the Vanguard fleet, human ships that had survived the impossible, aligning their weapons and firing into the abyss. And from that darkness, something fired back. The story of their return would shake the galaxy. But for now, no one knew whether the lost human fleet had come home as saviors or as the first warning of something far worse. The message that started it all still echoes in the archives, replaying endlessly. "Fleet Command, this is humanity's Vanguard," returning from the dark. But no one has ever decoded the last few words, buried beneath static. Words that, once revealed, might change everything. For several hours there was only silence. The Argent Dawn drifted among giants, ancient human warships older than any civilization still breathing. No one spoke. Every member of the crew just watched the colossal vessels move with eerie precision, like soldiers awakening from a forgotten dream. The sensors struggled to identify what was powering them. The readings suggested energy levels beyond modern comprehension. Too stable, too controlled for technology that ancient. It made no sense. The captain stood by the viewport, staring at the HNS Resolute, the ship that first responded to their signal. Its hull bore the marks of unimaginable battles, pitted and scarred, yet it radiated a kind of strength that modern fleets could never match. He wondered what kind of men and women had commanded these ships, what they had seen, what they had fought, and most of all, what had kept them alive for 1,000,000 years. The communications officer tried again to re-establish contact, but the same static filled the air. The moment she began to lose hope, the voice returned, clearer now, stronger. "Identify your mission. You are trespassing in restricted human territory." Her voice trembled as she replied, "We're from the Terran Republic. The year is 3,198,402. We received your distress beacon. Humanity thought you were lost." There was a long pause. Then came the answer. "You are not authorized to access this region. Return to your origin point immediately." The captain leaned closer to the console. "We can't. Our ship is trapped in your field. We just want to understand what happened to you." Another silence followed. Then the voice spoke again, softer now, almost human. "Understanding is dangerous. The things we've seen, they don't belong in your time." The line went dead. Confusion rippled through the crew. Some wanted to follow the order and retreat, but others, scientists, historians, idealists, wanted to stay. They had found proof that human civilization had once been far greater than anyone imagined. The captain finally broke the silence. "If they didn't want us here, they wouldn't have let us get this close. We're going to find out the truth." He ordered a probe launch toward the Resolute. The small craft moved silently through the void, its cameras transmitting live visuals. It drifted closer and closer until it passed through the glowing blue energy field surrounding the fleet. The instant it crossed the barrier, the feed began to distort. Fragments of video flickered on screen, images that made no sense. A planet burning under a black sun. Human soldiers standing in airless ruins. Something vast moving through space, blotting out the stars. Then the signal vanished. The engineer monitoring the probe turned pale. That wasn't sensor noise. Those were recordings. Memories. The captain frowned. Memories of what? The ship's AI analyzed the data fragments and displayed them across the main console. The energy readings inside the field were identical to those produced by human neural activity, like brain waves. Somehow, the entire fleet seemed to be alive, operating as a single consciousness. But the strangest part wasn't the readings, it was the location. The data confirmed that they weren't in normal space anymore. They were inside a compressed fold of time, a kind of pocket dimension. To the outside universe, 1,000,000 years had passed. For the fleet, it might have been only days. The captain felt a chill crawl down his spine. "They never left the war," he whispered. Meanwhile, the crew began noticing other strange things. The ship's clocks drifted out of sync. Some claimed they could hear faint echoes, footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in languages no one spoke anymore. A few even said they saw figures in old-style uniforms reflected in the glass. The science officer dismissed it as stress, but the fear was spreading. Then a new transmission came through, not from the Resolute, but from deep within the fleet's formation. A different voice spoke, weary but commanding. "To whoever hears this, if you are human, listen carefully. The dark between stars is not empty. It consumes. We held it back for as long as we could." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. The voice continued, fading in and out with interference. "We thought we were saving humanity. We thought the light would last. But the void learns. It adapts. We built weapons to destroy it, but each one only made it stronger. Don't awaken the others. They're not all—" The transmission cut off before the last word. The communications officer turned pale. "Others? There are more of them?" Before anyone could respond, one of the nearby warships, smaller, darker, and heavily damaged, suddenly powered on. Its lights flickered like fireflies and its engines ignited with a low hum that vibrated through space. But this time the fleet didn't react. It was as if they didn't even notice. Then, slowly, that ship began to drift toward the Argent Dawn. The captain ordered defensive shields raised, but nothing worked. The field surrounding the ancient ship neutralized every system. It came closer and closer until its shadow swallowed the Argent Dawn completely. Then a deep metallic sound echoed across the hull, something docking onto them. A moment later, the ship's lights dimmed and the interior temperature dropped. They could hear it now. Footsteps, moving through the corridors. The security team prepared to intercept, but every camera feed showed only flickering shadows. When the airlock door finally opened, no one was standing there, just a faint mist curling into the cabin. And from that mist came a sound, soft, distant, like a heartbeat. In the command deck, every monitor lit up at once. A single image filled the screens. A human face, pale and scarred, eyes glowing faintly with the same blue light as the fleet outside. The voice that followed was calm, but heavy with exhaustion. "We are what remains of the Vanguard. We've seen the end of time, and it follows us still." The captain stared in disbelief. "Who are you?" The figure blinked slowly, as if struggling to remember. "Once we were explorers. Then soldiers. Then survivors." "The darkness took everything from us. We built these ships to fight it, but in the end, We became part of it. Now it sleeps inside our hulls, waiting. The connection flickered, and the figure leaned closer to the screen. You shouldn't have come here. If it senses you, it will wake. The transmission ended and the power returned to normal. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the navigation officer said quietly, "Captain, we're no longer where we were. The stars outside, they're changing." The viewport revealed a sky full of new constellations. In the distance, the void shimmered like liquid shadow, swallowing the light from nearby stars. It was moving closer. The captain turned to the crew. "Record everything. If we don't make it back, someone has to know what happened here." But deep down, he already knew they weren't going back. Not yet. They had found something far older than human civilization itself. Something waiting in the dark, patient and hungry. And somehow, humanity's lost fleet had been the only thing holding it at bay. Now that the Argent Dawn had arrived, the balance had shifted. The sensors started detecting faint signals within the void, echoes of ships, structures, perhaps even civilizations swallowed long ago. It wasn't empty space out there. It was something alive, something ancient enough to remember humanity's first fire. The captain stood at the viewport, watching as the fleet formed a defensive wall between them and the approaching darkness. His heart pounded with both fear and pride. Those ships, the relics of a forgotten age, were still protecting humanity even now, he whispered under his breath. What kind of war could last 1,000,000 years? Behind him, one of the crew members answered softly, "The kind we were never meant to win." Outside, the void rippled again, like a living curtain of night. And from within, faint shapes began to emerge, massive and silent, their outlines impossible to define. The lost human fleet started to charge their weapons, ancient energy building up like thunder before a storm. The captain took a deep breath and steadied his voice. "Record this. Humanity deserves to remember." And as the stars vanished one by one, the Argent Dawn drifted closer to the heart of the darkness, unaware that the truth waiting there would change everything humanity thought it knew about time, war, and what it meant to survive. The void was not silent anymore. It whispered. At first, it sounded like static, harmless background noise, but then words began to form. Faint, broken, almost pleading. "Return! Return!" The crew of the Argent Dawn tried to block it out, but it seeped into every channel, every frequency. Even when they muted the comms, the sound lingered in their ears, as if it were inside their minds. The captain refused to let panic spread. He ordered the crew to focus on scanning the incoming distortions, but the readings made no sense. The objects emerging from the dark weren't solid. They seemed to shift between matter and energy, appearing for moments and then vanishing again. And yet, every time one of them flickered into focus, the sensors recorded mass readings heavier than a planet. Whatever they were, they defied the laws of reality. The science officer leaned over her console, whispering, "It's not just distortion, Captain. It's memory. The void is replaying pieces of time." The captain frowned. "Time doesn't replay." She looked up at him, her eyes uncertain. "Not in our space, it doesn't." Outside, the Vanguard fleet held its formation, ancient engines burning bright against the growing darkness. The ships moved like living things, each one turning and aligning as if guided by instinct. On the Resolute, the old warship that had first spoken to them, energy levels surged. A massive pulse rippled through the surrounding space, like a heartbeat echoing through eternity. The darkness seemed to recoil for a moment, but then it pressed closer again. That's when they saw it. Something vast moved behind the shimmering black veil, too big to comprehend. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even alive in any familiar sense. It was more like a shadow cast across existence itself. When it passed near the fleet, the stars behind it bent, as if reality itself was being pulled apart. The crew of the Argent Dawn could barely breathe. "What is that thing?" someone whispered. The science officer shook her head. "Whatever it is, it's what they've been fighting. Maybe what they ran from?" Then the comms came alive again, this time with a different voice. Rough, older, and strained. "You must not let it reach your time. If it crosses the threshold, everything ends." The captain leaned forward. "Who are you?" The voice hesitated. We were the last of the vanguard. We built the temporal gate to contain it. But we failed. We became part of the prison. Every second we've been fighting is borrowed time. The words hung in the air. The captain tried to understand. You mean, you're inside the gate? Yes, the voice answered. And now you are too. The crew exchanged horrified looks. If that was true, then they weren't just lost. They were trapped in a fragment of frozen time, part of a battlefield that had lasted for eternity. While the captain struggled to process this, one of the engineers called out from the lower deck. Sir, you'll want to see this. The captain hurried down where a group of technicians had gathered around a flickering holographic map. It showed a massive energy core at the center of the fleet, an impossible sphere of shifting light. It's the gate, the engineer said. It's still active. They're using it to hold the void back. The captain stared at the readings. The energy levels were unstable, fluctuating wildly. If the gate failed, everything in that pocket dimension, every ship, every human, every trace of light would be erased. But something else was interfering with it, something feeding from it. The readings showed a second signal interwoven with the gate's core, a human transmission, repeating endlessly. The science officer adjusted the filters, and suddenly a faint image appeared, a human figure in a shattered control room surrounded by flickering light. His voice echoed through the static. If anyone finds this, the vanguard is not what you think. We thought we were saving humanity. We became something else. Don't open the gate. It remembers everything we lost. The image vanished, replaced by static. Before anyone could react, alarms blared across the ship. The field surrounding the fleet began to distort, rippling like water in a storm. The massive shadow in the distance was moving again, faster this time, and its presence distorted gravity itself. The Argent Dawn began to drift toward the fleet, pulled by invisible currents. The captain ordered the engines to full power, but the ship didn't respond. "It's pulling us in!" the pilot shouted. Then, unexpectedly, a beam of blue light shot from the Resolute and enveloped the Argent Dawn. For a moment, everything stopped. The ship stabilized and all motion ceased. The captain's comms console blinked once and the old voice returned. "We can hold you here, but not for long. You must leave this place before the gate collapses." The captain gritted his teeth. "We can't leave without understanding what's happening. If this darkness threatens humanity, we need to know how to fight it." The voice hesitated. "You don't fight it. You endure it. That's what we learned. Every victory we thought we won only made it stronger. It feeds on fear, memory, and time. When we tried to destroy it, it learned to become us." The captain felt a chill spread through his chest. "Become us?" "Yes," the voice said. "The longer we stayed here, the less human we became. Our ships, our minds, our very souls. They fused with the gate. We are its jailers and its prisoners." As the words sank in, the crew fell silent. Outside, the fleet glowed brighter, their engines flaring as though preparing for one final stand. The science officer whispered, "They're holding it back so it doesn't reach us." The captain looked out at the ancient ships and felt a surge of something between awe and sorrow. 1,000,000 years of sacrifice, and no one remembered them. But not everyone on the Argent Dawn agreed on what to do. The ship's engineer, driven by curiosity, believed the gate could be studied, maybe even harnessed. "If it's a time structure," he said, "we could learn to control it. Imagine what humanity could do with that kind of power." Others disagreed, calling it reckless. The tension aboard the ship grew. Then one of the side consoles lit up, a warning message from the fleet itself. One of the vanguard ships had broken formation. Its systems were spiking out of control. Through the viewport, they saw it turn away from the line, its engines flaring brighter and brighter. "It's collapsing," the science officer said. "It's losing control of its reactor." Before anyone could react, the ship imploded silently and a shock wave of light spread across the void. The darkness reacted instantly, rushing toward the energy like a predator sensing blood. The fleet opened fire, a wall of light erupting in defense. The Argent Dawn shook as radiation washed over its hull. "Get us behind the fleet!" the captain shouted. The pilot tried, but the navigation systems flickered again. For a split second, every screen on the bridge showed something impossible. Hundreds of human faces, flickering like ghosts. Some were ancient. Some were modern. All were screaming. The ship's AI glitched, displaying a single line of corrupted text. "The void remembers you." The captain's hands tightened on the console. He didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing. Whatever this darkness was, it wasn't just a force of nature. It was aware, and it wanted out. As the fleet fired volley after volley into the abyss, the Argent Dawn systems started failing one by one. Gravity wavered. Lights dimmed. The sound of distant voices filled the corridors again, soft, human, desperate. One of the younger crew members froze, whispering, "Captain, I think they're calling my name." The captain turned sharply. "Don't answer." The voices grew louder. "Help us come home." The ship's temperature dropped, frost forming on the inside of the windows. Outside, the fleet continued its impossible war, holding back something that no human mind could truly understand. The captain looked into the darkness, knowing that whatever came next would decide more than just their survival. It would decide whether the light of humanity's past would ever reach the future again. And somewhere in the deep, the void pulsed once more, like a heart preparing to wake. The bridge was trembling. Every light on the Argent Dawn flickered, casting long, ghost-like shadows across the faces of the crew. The sound of the void's pulse, steady, heavy, and unnatural, filled the air like a second heartbeat. Outside, the ancient Vanguard fleet moved with machine-like precision, their weapons blazing with light that tore through the blackness. Each blast illuminated the darkness just long enough for the crew to see shapes moving within it, vast, twisting forms that didn't obey any law of nature. They bent around space itself, flickering in and out of existence like a dream trying to become real. The captain gripped the console. "Power to the forward shields. Hold our position behind the Resolute." The crew scrambled to obey, but the ship's systems were fighting back. The darkness was pressing against them, like a living storm clawing at their hull. The engineer shouted from below deck that the power grid was failing again, the reactors losing sync. The science officer was shouting readings that made no sense. Negative temperatures, inverted radiation, space folding in on itself. Every word only deepened the crew's fear. Through the haze of static and alarms, a new transmission cut through. The same voice from the Resolute, calm but strained. "We can't hold it much longer. The gate is destabilizing." "It's learning again." The captain leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Learning what?" "That you're here," came the reply. "It adapts to awareness. The more you understand it, the stronger it becomes. That's why we sealed ourselves away, to keep it from finding humanity again." The crew exchanged horrified glances. The science officer whispered, "Then by finding them, we brought it back." A deep vibration rolled through the ship. The stars outside began to stretch, bending into long, spiraling lines. The entire fleet was being pulled toward the center of the void, toward the massive, glowing sphere that marked the gate. It pulsed faster now, flickering between colors no human eye could name. With each pulse, the ancient ships dimmed, as if feeding their energy into it. The captain slammed his hand against the console. "They're sacrificing themselves to keep it contained." One of the younger crew members shouted, "But if they die, who keeps it sealed?" No one had an answer. The Resolute sent another burst of communication, this time not words, but coordinates. "A location deep within the gate's event field." The captain stared at the data. "They want us to go in?" The science officer hesitated. "If we enter that field, time won't behave normally. We might never come out." The captain's eyes hardened. "If we don't, there may not be anything left to come back to." Before he could give the order, the darkness struck. It wasn't like a beam or explosion, it was pressure. A crushing, invisible wave slammed into the fleet, making entire ships buckle. One of the smaller Vanguard vessels folded in on itself, disappearing in a flash of light. The void devoured it instantly. The scream of tearing metal echoed through the Argent Dawn's hull, followed by the groan of systems dying one by one. The engineer's voice broke through the chaos. "Reactors going critical. Whatever that thing is, it's draining our core." The captain shouted over the noise, "Divert all power to the shields!" But it was too late. The lights went out completely. For a long moment, there was only darkness. Then, one by one, dim emergency lamps flickered back to life. In that pale glow, they could see something impossible, faint silhouettes walking through the air, figures made of light and shadow, shaped like humans but hollow. Their faces were blank, yet somehow filled with grief. The crew froze. No one moved. The figures drifted silently across the bridge, reaching out toward the controls, toward the crew members themselves. The temperature dropped again, breath turning to mist. One of the crew whispered, "They look like us." The science officer's voice trembled. "They are us. Or what's left of them. Echoes from the gate." As if reacting to the words, one of the ghostly figures turned its head, and its hollow eyes met hers. A whisper filled the room, barely audible. We tried to hold it. We failed. Then the figures vanished, leaving behind a faint hum that faded into silence. The captain turned toward the viewport. The void was closer now, and through its shifting black surface he could see flashes of memory. Cities burning, oceans freezing, entire worlds being erased. It wasn't just a weapon. It was everything humanity feared, the embodiment of extinction itself. And the fleet had been fighting it for longer than history could remember. "Captain," the pilot called out, "the Resolute is signaling again. They're opening their hull. They want us inside." The captain hesitated. "A boarding request?" "More like a summons." With a heavy breath, he gave the order. "Prepare docking." The Argent Dawn maneuvered closer to the massive warship. As they approached, the Resolute's exterior armor plates peeled back like petals, revealing a glowing interior, rivers of energy running through ancient corridors. The ship was alive, pulsing with the same faint blue light that powered the entire fleet. When the airlock sealed, a team of 5 stepped through. The interior was massive and strangely quiet. Dust floated in zero gravity. Human bones, long turned to crystal, rested in their suits, still at their stations. And yet, the ship's systems were still running, its energy undying. The science officer touched one of the walls and gasped. "It's warm. The ship's reacting to us." As they moved deeper inside, the lights brightened, revealing massive holographic displays, records from 1,000,000 years ago. They showed the Vanguard fleet before the war, thousands of human ships stretching across the stars, their banners shining proudly. Then the recordings shifted. They showed the moment the darkness first appeared, a black tear in space that swallowed whole planets in seconds. Humanity had tried to fight it, tried to reason with it, but it wasn't alive. It was hunger made real. One recording showed the creation of the temporal gate. The engineers spoke in old languages, their faces tired but determined. "We'll trap it here," one said, "even if it means trapping ourselves." The scene ended with a single phrase, repeated like a prayer. "Let humanity forget us so it may survive." The captain stared at the recordings in silence. They gave up everything to keep this contained. Before the science officer could respond, the ship's core room came alive with motion. A holographic figure appeared, tall, armored, and unmistakably human. His eyes glowed faintly, his voice heavy with age. "You shouldn't have come." "The seal is weakening," the captain stepped forward. "Then help us fix it. Tell us what to do." The figure shook his head. "There's no fixing it. The moment your ship entered this space, the void sensed new life. It's adapting. It's already reaching beyond the gate. Soon it will remember where humanity is." The captain's heart sank. "Then we destroy the gate." The hologram's expression didn't change. "Destroying the gate will free it. Containing it will consume you. Either way, the war begins again." For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the engines and the low pulse of the void outside filled the silence. Then the ship began to tremble violently. The hologram turned, looking toward the corridor. "It's breaching through." Through the viewport, they saw it, the darkness rising higher, taking shape. For the first time, they could see its true form. It wasn't just shadow. It was made of countless human faces, echoes of those who had been lost to it, merged into something vast and terrible. It was the memory of everything humanity had ever feared. The holographic figure's voice broke through the chaos. "The fleet is preparing its final sequence." "You must leave now!" The captain shook his head. "If the fleet falls, humanity's defense falls with it." "You don't understand," the hologram said, his voice rising. "The fleet is the seal. If they die, the darkness will wake completely. But if you stay, it will claim you too." The deck shuddered violently as alarms screamed. The Argent Dawn's crew scrambled back toward their airlock, the hologram following them with one last message. "The past is not gone. It's waiting. Choose wisely, Captain. The next move belongs to humanity." They barely made it back aboard as the Resolute began to fracture, light spilling from its hull like liquid fire. The ancient ships around it adjusted formation, their reactors surging beyond critical limits. The captain grabbed the intercom, his voice steady but grim. "All hands, brace for impact. We're at the heart of it now." Outside, the darkness descended. The fleet fired everything they had. The gate flared with blinding light, and space itself began to twist. The Argent Dawn was caught in the pull, spinning toward the collapsing core as the sensors screamed warnings faster than anyone could read them. And in that final instant, before the light consumed everything, the captain saw one last image on his screen. Earth. Blue. Fragile. And so very far away, then the world vanished in white. The signal came again. A faint rhythmic pulse from the depths of the fleet's oldest dreadnought, buried within its shattered command core. It was impossible, at least according to every engineer and historian aboard the Dawn Reclaimer. Those ships had been silent for nearly 1,000,000 years. Their systems shouldn't even function anymore. And yet, the pulse persisted, like a heartbeat that refused to die. Captain Rian stood in the observation bay, watching the dead ships drift across the void. Their hulls were scarred, half-broken, yet impossibly intact. The fleet, humanity's lost armada, had been built in an age long forgotten. No one knew where it had gone or how it had survived. They only knew one thing: it had returned. And it was sending a message. When the first translation came through, it froze the command deck into silence. Humanity. Still alive? That was all the message said, distorted but unmistakable. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a relic from the past. Someone or something was alive aboard those ships. The analysts worked without rest, feeding every fragment of data through deep space scanners, quantum linguistics arrays, and relic decoders pulled from old archives. The results only deepened the mystery. The voice came from the dreadnought Solace Eternal, flagship of the fleet. Its central reactor still pulsed faintly, drawing power from something unknown, something not in their records. The ship's position in the formation, the tight cohesion of the remaining vessels, it all hinted at intention. These ships weren't drifting aimlessly. They were waiting. A council was formed aboard the Dawn Reclaimer. Engineers, historians, officers, everyone with clearance or curiosity wanted a say. Some argued the fleet was a trap, a leftover weapon designed by a long-dead humanity. Others believed it was a beacon, a message from their ancestors, proof that humanity had once conquered the stars. But a smaller group, led by Ryan, believed something else entirely. They thought the fleet had come back because it had to. During one quiet cycle, Rian found himself staring at the starless horizon. The Solace Eternal loomed like a ghost, larger than any living ship. Its design was unfamiliar yet deeply human. Symmetrical lines, reinforced armor, markings that hadn't been used for millennia. Along its surface, symbols glowed faintly, patterns no one could identify. They weren't just aesthetic. They pulsed in rhythm with the signal, almost like they were alive. As days turned into weeks, the mystery grew. Probes sent into the fleet vanished without warning. Communications flickered in and out. Even time itself seemed distorted near the ships. Seconds stretched into minutes. Sensors malfunctioned, and some crew members reported hearing whispers through their comms, voices speaking languages older than any database contained. The fleet was warping reality around it. Then, on the 15th day, something changed. The Solace Eternal turned. Slowly, deliberately. The ancient dreadnought, silent for 1,000,000 years, rotated its hull to face the observing human ships. Engines that should have been dust flared with a dull crimson light. One by one, the other ships followed. The entire fleet aligned into a precise formation, locking onto the Dawn Reclaimer's position. Panic spread through the command deck. Alarms blared. Shields activated. Every weapon went online, but Ryan didn't give the order to fire. He couldn't. There was something about the way those ships moved, something deliberate almost. Respectful. Then a new transmission came through. Not words this time, but an image. A map of the galaxy, different from the one humanity knew. Thousands of stars marked in red, sectors burned, erased, and at the center of it all, a single word appeared in ancient Earth script: return. The implications hit hard. The fleet hadn't just come back, it had escaped. The scientists argued endlessly over what the map represented. Some said it showed the home they'd once known, long destroyed. Others believed it was a warning, something the ancient humans had fought and lost against. Ryan, however, felt something deeper. A quiet instinct that whispered of danger and destiny intertwined. The turning point came when the fleet began to emit a gravitational field, faint but expanding. It wasn't an attack. It was a signal. And when human sensors traced its origin, they found something horrifying. An object beyond the galactic rim, matching no known celestial signature. A structure, massive and moving. The lost fleet had brought something with it. Meanwhile, tensions among the human crews began to rise. Some officers wanted to withdraw, to leave the ghosts of the past alone. Others believed they were standing at the edge of humanity's greatest discovery. Power struggles broke out. Fear crept into the ranks. Old rivalries flared and alliances fractured under the weight of uncertainty. Among the crew was an archaeotech researcher named Ilra, whose obsession with ancient signals bordered on madness. She was convinced that the fleet wasn't just ancient, it was from a different timeline. A remnant of a humanity that had evolved, fought, and died in another universe. She called them the first kind. Her theories were dismissed until she decoded one final line from the Solace Eternal's transmission. It read, "The war followed us through time. The realization hit like a meteor. The fleet hadn't been lost, it had been fleeing. Fleeing from something that existed beyond known time, something powerful enough to erase empires across galaxies. Humanity's ancestors had built these ships not to explore, but to escape. And now, after 1,000,000 years, they had returned, still being chased by whatever hunted them. The crew of the Dawn Reclaimer began noticing strange phenomena. Shadows flickered across the stars. Sensors picked up distortions that vanished when scanned directly. One of the forward scouts reported a structure moving behind the fleet, something vast and formless, bending light itself. And then he disappeared mid-transmission. Fear became the new oxygen aboard the ships. The older fleet had started to awaken, systems powering on across thousands of vessels. No one dared to attack or flee. It felt as if time itself held its breath. Ryan made his choice then. He ordered a boarding mission. They had to know what was happening aboard the Solace Eternal. The crew that volunteered were the best humanity had to offer, engineers, tacticians, soldiers, but none of them truly understood what they were stepping into. The moment their shuttle breached the dreadnought's surface, communications cut out. Hours passed, then days, nothing returned. No signals, no readings, just silence. Until finally one transmission broke through, a voice, faint, trembling, almost human. "Captain?" "We found them!" The bridge froze. "Found who?" Ryan demanded, his voice low. Static filled the air. Then the voice returned, distorted but clear enough to send a chill through every spine aboard. "They're still alive, and they're waiting for orders." The message ended there. But even through the static, Ryan could hear it, the faint rhythmic pulse still echoing across the comms. The same heartbeat that started it all. Only now it sounded closer, and for the first time, humanity began to realize that maybe the fleet hadn't come back for help. Maybe it had come back home. But what if something else had followed it? Something still hidden in the darkness beyond? The next pulse came louder, spreading across every ship in the human fleet. The stars outside began to flicker, and somewhere in that infinite void, something ancient and colossal began to stir. The pulse shook the command deck. It wasn't just sound, it was impact, like the heartbeat of a dying star echoing through the hull. Every instrument flickered, every screen glitched, and for a moment it felt like the universe itself was stuttering. The human fleet held formation, orbiting the silent giants of the Lost Armada as if waiting for something inevitable to happen. Then, all at once, the dreadnoughts lit up. 1,000 ships that had slept for 1,000,000 years came alive together, their hulls glowing with blinding light and energy signatures beyond anything human sensors could explain. Ryan gripped the rail as the command crew scrambled around him, their voices overlapping in a mix of awe and panic. "Power readings off the scale. Reactors across the entire fleet are active," someone shouted. "They're generating a temporal field," another voice yelled, disbelief breaking through. Ryan's mind raced. Temporal fields meant time manipulation. The lost fleet wasn't just returning, it was doing something to reality itself. Then came the voice again. This time it filled every channel, every frequency. It wasn't distorted anymore, it was clear, powerful, unmistakably human. "Descendants, you have endured." The words reverberated in their bones. "We have waited for your return, but you must not follow where we came from." Silence fell over the bridge. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of that voice, the calm authority of it, made everyone feel small. Ryan leaned forward. "Identify yourself," he said quietly. "Who are you?" The reply came after a pause that felt eternal. "We are what remains of the first kind, the ones who defied extinction, the ones who ran from the darkness between stars." Every heart aboard the Dawn Reclaimer seemed to stop. The first kind, the mythic progenitors of all human civilizations, were real, and they were still here, buried within those ships, preserved across impossible spans of time. But something in that voice felt wrong. There was sorrow there, and fear. Before Ryan could respond, Ilra stormed onto the bridge, holding a data pad trembling in her hands. "Captain," she gasped. "I found it. The fleet's energy pattern, it's not random." "It's a seal." Ryan turned sharply. "A seal?" She nodded. "Yes, the temporal field. It isn't powering the fleet. It's containing something. Something massive. Something alive." Before anyone could process that, the space beyond the dreadnoughts tore open like paper. A rift, glowing with impossible light, ripped across the void. And from that wound in reality came a shape, vast, formless, shimmering like a shadow of a dying universe. It wasn't metal or matter. It was something older. A presence. The Solace. Eternal moved forward, its hull cracking apart as its core flared brighter than a sun. The ancient voice spoke again, louder this time. "We cannot hold it back any longer." It followed us through the folds of time. "You must flee." The rift expanded, swallowing starlight. The thing within it pulsed like a heartbeat that wasn't supposed to exist. Gravity shifted. The fleet's formation warped. It wasn't attacking, it was consuming time itself. Every second stretched, fracturing into eternity. Ryan stared at the creature's outline, his breath short. It wasn't just darkness. It was everything that had been lost. A manifestation of decay, of the universe's forgotten ends. "And it was hungry. Helm, full retreat," he ordered. The command was instant, but the fleet barely moved. Time was breaking apart. Ships were flickering in and out of existence. The Lost Armada, however, remained steady. Their engines roared, releasing energy fields that wrapped around the human vessels, shielding them from the rift's pull. Ilra shouted over the alarms, "Captain! They're not trying to escape. They're stabilizing the breach. They're sacrificing themselves." The realization hit like thunder. The first kind hadn't survived. They'd been trapped, holding the line for 1,000,000 years to keep this thing contained. The lost fleet's return wasn't salvation. It was their final act of defense. Ryan watched as, one by one, the ancient ships turned toward the rift. The Solace Eternal transmitted one final message. "Do not repeat our mistake. Do not chase beyond the light." Then its reactor flared brighter than any star humanity had ever seen. The explosion was silent, but absolute. A wave of light expanded outward, consuming the rift, shattering it into nothing. Space folded, then healed. The darkness vanished. When vision returned, the ancient fleet was gone. Every ship, every trace. Only the Dawn Reclaimer and its small fleet remained, drifting in stunned silence. The stars looked dimmer, as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath after something unbearable. Hours later, the silence broke. A faint signal came through, weak, fading, almost inaudible. It came from the coordinates where the solace eternal had vanished. Ilra and her team traced it, amplified it, and brought it onto the main screen. The waveform was erratic, but beneath the noise there were words. Humanity endures. The line is unbroken. Then the signal ended forever. The crew stood motionless. Some cried. Some stared blankly into the stars. The reality of it all began to sink in. Humanity hadn't just witnessed history, they'd been protected by it. Their ancestors had fought a war across time itself to give them a chance to live. But the quiet didn't last long. Weeks after returning to normal space, strange phenomena began to appear. Time distortions, gravitational echoes, fragments of data that shouldn't exist began showing up in deep space relays, images of the lost fleet, flickering like ghosts, repeating that same final line. The line is unbroken. At first, Ryan thought it was a glitch, residual data from the temporal burst. But one night, when the ship drifted through an uncharted system, the stars ahead shifted unnaturally. A faint silhouette appeared, massive, familiar. A single ship, ancient and silent, drifting through the dark. It was the Solace Eternal. No one believed it at first. The scanners showed nothing. But to the naked eye, it was there, gliding across the void, its hull dimly glowing. As Ryan watched, a soft pulse radiated from it, slow and rhythmic. The same heartbeat that had started it all. Ilra whispered, "It's not gone, Captain." "They're still out there." Ryan didn't reply. He just stared at the drifting light, realizing the truth. The first kind hadn't died in that explosion. They'd become part of time itself, guardians watching from the shadows of the past and future. And maybe, just maybe, their war wasn't truly over. The pulse faded, leaving only the silence of the stars. But deep inside the ship's comm systems, a single unread message blinked to life, one that hadn't been sent through any known channel. It read, "Prepare. The darkness remembers." And for the first time since the Lost Fleet's return, Ryan understood that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something greater, something humanity would one day have to face again. Because what the first kind ran from had found the light once more. The stars outside shimmered faintly, and the universe seemed to whisper a single truth. Carried across 1,000,000 years, humanity had survived time itself, but time was not done with humanity. The silence that followed was unlike anything Ryan had ever felt. The Dawn Reclaimer drifted through the quiet of space, surrounded by the fading echoes of a war that had begun before history itself. The last pulse from the Solace Eternal had vanished, leaving nothing behind but stars and questions. For days, no one spoke much. Every person aboard the ship carried the weight of what they'd witnessed, of what they now understood about humanity's past and the darkness that had nearly erased it. Ryan stood by the observation window, watching the faint shimmer where the rift had been. The universe looked peaceful again, almost normal, but that peace felt fragile. "They bought us time," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Ilra stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," she murmured, "but time isn't forever. Whatever they sealed, it remembers." The words lingered in his mind. Humanity had always looked forward, chasing progress, stars, and dreams. But now they knew there were things behind them, things buried in the folds of time, waiting. Still, there was comfort in knowing the first kind had endured long enough to warn them. The legacy wasn't just ancient ships or technology. It was survival itself. When the fleet returned to human space, the story spread faster than light. Entire worlds stopped to listen. Scientists, historians, and leaders gathered across colonies to decode the data from the Dawn Reclaimer. The transmissions from the Lost Fleet became sacred texts of a kind, records of a humanity that had conquered time and paid the price for it. The phrase "the line is unbroken" became more than words. It became a vow. Ryan was called before the Interstellar Council, questioned for hours about everything he had seen. Most didn't believe half of it. Some accused him of fabricating it, others of discovering alien trickery. but none could explain the gravitational distortions that followed his fleet home, or the data that matched no known physics. Eventually, the council classified the event as a temporal containment anomaly. It sounded neat and official, but everyone aboard the Dawn Reclaimer knew the truth ran deeper than science would ever admit. Ilra continued her research, driven by both fascination and guilt. She believed the first kind had left more than just warnings. They had left a map, a way to understand what had followed them. She found traces of encoded patterns within the Solace Eternal's final signal, structures buried in the noise that hinted at another layer of meaning. Ryan supported her work, though part of him wished she would stop. He'd seen what curiosity could awaken. Months passed. Life aboard the ship settled back into rhythm. The crew laughed again, trained again, dreamed again. Yet something about the stars felt different now. There was a quiet awareness that they weren't alone, not in the way they once thought. Humanity wasn't just exploring space anymore, it was inheriting it. One night, while the fleet drifted between systems, Ilra came to the bridge holding a small data core. "Captain," she said, her voice low, "I think I finally understand the last message." Ryan raised an eyebrow, exhausted but intrigued. She placed the core on the console and activated it. A faint holographic image flickered into view, an ancient man in worn armor, his face lined with age but unmistakably human. The same voice they'd heard before spoke again, only now the full message played. "If you are hearing this," the man said, "then our fight is over, but yours may yet come." The darkness we fled was not a creature, it was entropy given form. The end of all things, aware of what it consumes. We held it as long as we could. One day you will face it too. When that day comes, remember us, not for what we built, but for what we refused to surrender. Hope. The image faded. No light show, no grand finale, just silence. Ilra looked up, eyes shining. "They weren't gods," she whispered. "They were just like us, scared, desperate, and human." Ryan nodded slowly. "And that's what makes them worth remembering." The message spread through the fleet. For the first time in centuries, humanity felt connected not by conquest or technology, but by legacy. Across colonies and outposts, people began carving the words of the first kind into walls, flags, and even ships. We endured once. We will endure again. Years later, Rian retired to one of the outer colonies. He didn't crave command anymore. He spent his days teaching new pilots about the stars and telling stories of the lost fleet to children who would grow up believing it was myth. Sometimes he would walk to the colony's edge at night and stare into the dark horizon, wondering if the Solace Eternal was still out there, watching, guarding. One evening, as he stood alone, a soft hum filled the air. The stars flickered in a slow rhythm, faint, steady, familiar. It was the same heartbeat, the same signal. But this time it wasn't filled with warning. It was calm, peaceful. As if someone somewhere was simply saying goodbye, Ilra sent him a transmission soon after. Her research had revealed something astonishing. The coordinates embedded within the first kind's last signal pointed not to a danger, but to a memory, a hidden archive drifting beyond the galactic rim. It contained fragments of human history older than the stars themselves. Evidence that humanity had lived, died, and lived again, over and over through cycles beyond comprehension. Every extinction, every rebirth was part of the same story. Humanity never vanished. It evolved, changed, and returned. That night, Ryan watched the horizon and smiled. The fear that had once haunted him now felt distant. The universe was bigger, stranger, and far more connected than anyone had ever imagined. And somewhere, across the sea of stars, echoes of the first kind still drifted, carrying the same message forward through eternity. Before he went inside, Ryan left a small beacon on the ground, its light blinking softly against the dark. It transmitted a single signal, a message he'd written himself, a message for whoever might come next, whether in a year or a million years. It said, "We remember you, and we're still here." When dawn came, the sky turned gold, and for a brief moment, the stars above shimmered in patterns that almost looked like ships. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe imagination. But Ryan liked to think it was them, the guardians of time, watching the children of their legacy carry on the unbroken line. Humanity had learned something eternal that day. Survival wasn't just strength. It was memory, hope, the ability to look into the unknown and still choose to move forward. The universe had its darkness, yes. But as long as humans existed to face it, to challenge it, to hope against it, then no matter how many ages passed, no matter how far they drifted, the light would always find a way back. And somewhere, in that endless expanse of stars, the pulse of the lost fleet continued to echo, a quiet promise from the first humans to the last. We are never truly lost.